She entered her first year of college in 2021, when the world was still adjusting to life under COVID. For some students, that meant staying home with family and doing everything online. For others, it meant renting apartments off campus and avoiding the risk of dorm living altogether. But she didn't have the luxury of choice. Her parents lived about 15 minutes away, and because money was tight, she was assigned to a dorm room on campus. To save costs, she planned on spending weekends back at home and returning every Monday morning for classes. It seemed like a good balance: home comfort on the weekends, campus independence during the week. The dorm itself was a tall, brick-faced building with thin hallways and heavy wooden doors that always seemed to slam shut louder than they should. The walls were painted an off-white, cracked in some corners, and the carpets carried that unmistakable smell of old fabric, dust, and cleaning products. Not exactly glamorous, but she told herself this was part of the college experience, something everyone went through. She had been given her roommate's number before move-in day. It was a strange setup. The school essentially forced them to text each other before they even met. Still, she wanted to make the best of it. The roommate's messages were short, to the point, but at least polite, nothing alarming. But when move-in day came, the vibe was entirely different. Her roommate was there waiting in the room, leaning casually against her desk. She wasn't rude, but she wasn't warm either. There was a sharpness to the way she looked at her, as if she were judging her silently. At one point, while unpacking, the roommate muttered, "You know, last semester, I had this room all to myself. Pretty much everyone else has their own single rooms too." It wasn't said as a joke. It wasn't even said with a smile. It was said like a warning. She laughed nervously, trying to brush it off, but the comment stayed in her mind. The first week of classes passed uneventfully. Her roommate was rarely around, spending most of her nights at her boyfriend's dorm. That suited her fine. It gave her privacy, space, and time to settle into her own routine. On Fridays, she'd pack her bag and head back home, grateful for the familiarity of her parents' house. By Monday morning, she'd return to campus, drop her bag, and rush off to class. But something happened on that very first Monday back. Exhausted from the weekend, she climbed into her bed, a tall frame pushed against the wall, so high she had to use a stool to get up. She had just closed her eyes when she felt the mattress dip slightly at the edge. It was a strange sensation, like the subtle pressure of someone leaning against the bed frame, just enough to make the mattress shift. Her eyes shot open, scanning the room. Her roommate wasn't there. Nobody was. She told herself it was just her imagination, or maybe the bed frame settling. Still, it left her unsettled. The following Monday, after another weekend at home, she returned and settled back onto the same mattress. Again, it dipped, but this time, it was more distinct, more deliberate. She lay frozen, eyes wide in the dark. The dip grew heavier, sinking in as if someone had actually sat down beside her. Her breathing quickened. She stayed still, terrified of moving, and then she heard it, a heavy thud on the floor, right beside her bed. The unmistakable sound of feet landing. Her chest tightened. She turned her head just slightly and saw her roommate lying in bed across the room, back turned, motionless. She wanted to believe it was a dream. She convinced herself she was half asleep, caught in that strange space between wakefulness and dreaming. But she wasn't. She knew she wasn't. By the third week, the fear had grown into dread. She almost didn't want to return Monday morning, but she had no choice. She climbed into bed, her heart already racing, her mind already braced for what might happen. And then, like clockwork, it did. The mattress dipped. Not faintly this time, deeply, heavily. Someone was there. She shut her eyes tight, willing herself not to move, not to breathe too loudly. That's when it happened. A hand, cold, steady, deliberate, It pressed against the back of her neck. Not hard, not forceful, but unmistakable. A palm resting flat against her skin, lingering, almost testing her. She wanted to scream, but the sound died in her throat. Her body was locked in place, paralyzed by terror. She counted the seconds, each one dragging out endlessly. Finally, the pressure lifted. Whoever it was, whatever it was, stepped off the bed. She forced herself to glance across the room. Her roommate lay facing the wall, body still. That was it. She bolted. She grabbed her phone, ran out into the hallway, and called her mother, her voice trembling. Within days, the school moved her to a different dorm. They honored her request that her roommate not be paired with anyone else again. But there were details she couldn't shake, like how her roommate once mentioned that a previous roommate hadn't stayed long. Like the drawer in her desk filled with prescription bottles explained away as acne medication, but locked tightly, always hidden. Was it sleepwalking, medication side effects, or was it something far darker? Her mother had her own theory. She believed the roommate was testing her, pushing boundaries, seeing how far she could go. And maybe, if she hadn't switched rooms, one night that hand on her neck might not have stopped at just resting there. By her final year of college, she thought she had adjusted to almost everything campus life could throw at her. The loneliness of freshman year was behind her. She had built a routine, a circle of friends, and a rhythm. She had faced homesickness, exams, and the constant struggle of balancing work with classes. But nothing prepared her for the night she almost didn't walk out of the business building alive. It started with an assignment, an advanced statistics project notorious for breaking students. The kind of assignment that wasn't just difficult, but draining, requiring late nights, endless calculations, and absolute focus. Her laptop had been acting up for weeks, crashing whenever she pushed it too hard. So instead of risking her project disappearing at home, she decided to use the computers in the business building. The business building was different from other places on campus. It wasn't the cheerful student union where laughter and chatter filled the air. It wasn't the library with its constant hum of activity. It stood apart, both physically and atmospherically, a 3-story building on the edge of campus, surrounded by patches of overgrown grass and tall, shadow-casting lampposts. By day, it was sterile. By night, it was something else entirely. She pushed through the heavy glass doors just after 10 p.m. and swiped her ID card, the green light beeping softly as the lock clicked open. The second she stepped inside, she was greeted by the familiar smell of industrial cleaners, a sharp, chemical tang that lingered in the air. The janitors had already finished for the evening, so the place was empty. At least, it was supposed to be. The hallways were dim, illuminated by buzzing fluorescent lights that flickered every so often, just enough to unsettle anyone walking alone. The tiles on the floor echoed every step like a drumbeat, making her feel as though her presence was magnified in the silence. She climbed the stairs to the second floor and entered the computer lab. The glow of monitors cast a cold light over the rows of empty desks. She chose a spot near the back, opened her notes, and got to work. For a while, it was almost peaceful. The rhythmic sound of typing, the occasional rustle of paper, the distant hum of the ventilation system. But at 11:30 p.m., that peace broke. A loud slam echoed down the hallway, a door shutting hard. She froze, her fingers hovering above the keyboard. It wasn't the front door. She knew the sound of that heavy entrance. This was something closer, inside the building. Her heartbeat quickened. Maybe it was another student, maybe a professor. She waited, straining her ears. That's when she heard them footsteps. Not casual, not hurried, slow, heavy, deliberate. each step echoing louder, closer, like someone dragging the moment out. Whoever it was wanted to be heard. Her skin prickled as the sound stopped right outside the lab. She didn't move, didn't breathe. The door had a small rectangular window, just big enough to peek through. But she couldn't bring herself to look. She just sat there, frozen. Then the handle rattled. Not gently, not like someone testing if it was locked. Violently, aggressively. The knob shook back and forth, metal clanking against metal, as though someone was determined to get in. Her heart slammed against her ribs. The lab door was always kept locked at night, accessible only by student ID. Tonight, that lock was her only protection. After 30 agonizing seconds, the rattling stopped. The silence that followed was almost worse. The footsteps started again, fading down the hall. She tried to convince herself it was nothing. Maybe a late-night janitor who forgot his keys. Maybe a student trying doors at random. She forced herself to keep typing, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still there, watching, waiting. 10 minutes later, the proof came. Above her, the ceiling groaned. Her eyes shot upward. The ceiling tiles, thin, white squares slotted into a grid, shifted slightly. Dust drifted down. Something was crawling across the beams above her. Every instinct screamed at her to run. She stuffed her notes into her backpack, yanked out her flash drive, and bolted for the door. The hallway stretched endlessly before her, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. She sprinted toward the stairwell, her footsteps echoing wildly. She pushed the heavy metal door open, its hinges creaking in protest, and started down the stairs 2 at a time. Halfway down, something made her look up. On the landing above, a man stood watching her. He wasn't dressed like a professor or a student. His clothes were ragged, hanging loosely from his frame. His hair was messy, unkempt. His face was mostly shadow, but one detail was unmistakable. The grin, wide, unsettling, unmoving. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just stood there, blocking the way up, his grin stretching impossibly wider as their eyes met. Her body reacted before her mind did. She turned and flew down the stairs, lungs burning, backpack slamming against her side. She burst through the first floor, shoving open the glass doors at the front entrance. Her ID card barely registered before the lock clicked open, and she stumbled into the cold night air. She didn't stop running until she reached the brightly lit main quad, surrounded by buildings where she knew someone, anyone, might be nearby. The next morning, in daylight, she returned. She didn't want to. Every nerve in her body resisted, but she had to. The project was due, and her flash drive needed to be plugged back in for the final submission. She walked the same hallway, trying to tell herself it was nothing. Maybe she had imagined the man. Maybe the footsteps were just echoes. Maybe exhaustion had played tricks on her mind. But when she stepped into the computer lab, her blood turned cold. Everything looked normal. The chairs were tucked in neatly. The monitors slept in idle glow. The only difference was above her workstation. 2 ceiling tiles were gone. Not shifted. Not loose. Gone. She stood frozen, realizing what that meant. Someone hadn't just been crawling up there. Someone had been watching her, waiting. And if she hadn't run when she did, they might have dropped down right into the room. Annabelle was only 16 when it happened. She didn't know then that one ordinary school day would turn into the single most terrifying memory of her life, a memory she would carry forever. Her school was new, modern, and designed with strict security in mind. Every student wore a lanyard with their ID attached. Without it, you couldn't move freely beyond the foyer. Every door inside required a scan. Teachers drilled into them the same rule from the first day. Never let anyone in if you don't know them. but rules only protect you if everyone follows them. It was the second week of term, and technically only her second full day there. She had been sick the week before and was still adjusting. That afternoon, in the middle of geography, she raised her hand to ask for a bathroom break. Normally, teachers refused. Breaks were supposed to be handled during lunch or recess. But she had downed a huge drink earlier, and her urgency was obvious. After a sigh and a few muttered complaints, her teacher waved her out. She walked quickly, lanyard bouncing against her chest as she scanned through the cafeteria doors. The entire area was empty, eerily so. During lunch, it was loud, alive, full of chatter and footsteps. But now, during lessons, it felt hollow. She used the bathroom, washed her hands, and retraced her steps back through the cafeteria. She expected silence. What she didn't expect was the man sitting at one of the tables. At first glance, he didn't alarm her. He was too old to be a student, so she assumed he was a teacher, maybe even a parent visitor. He wore a lanyard after all, and that usually meant belonging. He smiled when he noticed her. "Hey," he said. The sudden sound made her squeak, stumbling slightly in surprise. Embarrassed, she tried to laugh it off. "Sorry, didn't mean to scare you," the man added. His voice was casual, light, even friendly. Relieved, she relaxed a little. The lanyard made her feel safe. Teachers and staff always wore them. But there was something off she didn't catch in that moment. His ID was flipped backward, the blank side facing outward. Lots of students did that, but teachers? That was strange. The man leaned back in his chair. "Could you help me for just a minute?" he asked. "I left some work stuff in my car. Need an extra hand carrying it inside." The request felt normal enough. Adults ask students to help with little things all the time. Without thinking twice, she nodded. They walked together out of the cafeteria, across the foyer, and through the main entrance. The further they went, the more she noticed his silence. Teachers usually filled moments like that with small talk, asking about classes, making casual remarks. But he said nothing. His hands fidgeted constantly, sliding into his pockets and out again, ringing together as though he were fighting off nerves. Annabelle felt a strange tension in her chest but ignored it. The path to the car park was lined with tall bushes. From the school doors, you couldn't see the cars until you were almost at them. The man gestured ahead. "It's the blue one at the end," he said. His tone was brisk now, not casual. "In the boot, just a few bags." She followed, quickening her steps as they neared. But as the car came into view, her blood ran cold. Through the rear window, she saw movement. Two men, hunched low in the back seat, waiting. Her body locked up. She stopped walking, eyes fixed on the figures in the car. It was only a fraction of a second before they noticed she had seen them, but it was enough. One of the back doors flung open. A man lunged out, moving fast. At the same time, the man she had followed clamped his hand around her arm. His grip was strong, too strong for someone she thought was a harmless teacher. Her instincts exploded in panic. With a surge of adrenaline she didn't know she had, she wrenched her arm free. Her shoes skidded on the pavement as she turned and bolted toward the school. Behind her, heavy footsteps pounded against the ground, more than one set. They were chasing her. The glass entrance loomed ahead, automatic doors, too slow. If they caught her before the sensors opened them, she was done. But luck or fate was on her side. The doors slid open just in time. She sprinted into the foyer, the sound of her pulse louder than her own screams. She didn't stop until she reached a cafe attached to the library, where a woman behind the counter stared in alarm as Annabelle collapsed against the counter, breathless and terrified. Through gasps, she told her what happened. The cafe worker acted quickly, guiding her into an office where a teacher called her parents and the police. Security footage confirmed everything. The man wasn't a teacher. He wasn't staff. He had gotten in using a stolen lanyard one a student had dropped outside. That's why the ID was flipped backward. That's why he said nothing as they walked. He didn't want to risk giving himself away. Worse, he hadn't been alone. Police found 3 men total involved, and they were charged with attempted kidnapping. Annabelle didn't return to school for weeks. The shock clung to her, creeping into her dreams and everyday thoughts. Therapy helped, but the memory lingered. The smile that wasn't real, the hand gripping her arm, the figures waiting in the car, and the thought that haunted her most: if she hadn't noticed the men in the back seat, if she hadn't pulled away in that split second, she might never have come home that day.